Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
I'm Rabbi Charna, and I want to share some words for you, with you, that come from the bottom of my heart. And I notice I'm a little nervous because I'm feeling vulnerable to share like this joy that's in my heart right now. If I were going to name today's today's Devar, it might be Devarim, Sevarim, V'tikva. Words, stories, and hope. Because it is Shabbat Chazon. It is this Shabbat of vision. There was something within Isaiah, something within our prophets that have this vision to see what's happening and to create a trajectory to see what's going to go if we continue certain behaviors. This is a principle of Chokhmah, which we'll talk about more in a second. So one of the things I want to do today is, in the name of hope, I want to lay down a vision. And I want to lay down a vision that has to do with our community. I've been in and out of almost tears since I've been here, hearing about stories and how important stories are to us. We are now in the retelling in this book. It's all about retelling the story. So we have to look at what role do stories play in our lives personally, amongst friends, family, and in community. We'll get there in a second. But I want to just share with you, I never really knew my dad's dad, my grandfather. He passed when I was maybe 3 or 4. But my dad told me that these are the words that his father taught him. Those of you who know Yiddish will get this right away. Die ganze Welt steht auf der Spitzung. The future of the world rests on the tip of the tongue. I have spent my life trying to understand what that means. What does it mean? The future of the world rests at the tip of the tongue. Certainly, those at the end of the Second Temple period found out the hard way what the future of the world was based on what was at the tip of their tongues. Because it is said that the students of Akiva, these many thousands of students, were stuck in baseless acts of hatred. That they didn't know how to talk to each other, that they are contentious, that they were mean to each other, that they told tales about each other, that they gossiped, I read this in Hirsch, that they created conspiracy stories and theories. And these kinds of use of our words are dangerous for our society. We get to look and climb inside our words and lift them up. Please, God, please, God. So that is going to be a subtle invitation as I share these words of Torah with you. Reb Nachman of Bratslov. This parsha is always read on the Shabbat before Tisha B'Av because it speaks of the rebuke that Moses gave the Jews because of their blemished faith, which caused them to believe the spies and bemoan their entry into the land. And of course, V'et Hanan is always read on Shabbat after Tisha B'Av. So I guess what I'm saying here is to own our words, our devarim, to own them. These words that we choose, they frame our life. They're about to enter the promised land. And the children of Israel being asked, yes, watch your words. Yes, Shema, absolutely. Everything you beautifully said about that, Rebbe Ellen, that was so great. We listen, but in order to listen, we have to speak words that hopefully come from our heart. So you might have asked yourself, why did she ask us to keep our Chumashi? Please turn to page 984. And I want to play a little Torah study game with you to show you how we can use Torah to show us what our problem is and then to climb inside Torah to share the solution. Does that sound like a fun game? Yes. Okay. So we're on chapter 1, verse 12. Chapter 1, verse 12. And she said, fine. Yeah, chapter 1, verse 12, it starts, Echa. But let me say it with the proper intonation. Echa. Echa. How? Moses is about to say something from this place of lamentation. It's coming from his pain body. Echa, that comes from our pain body. Echa esa levado. How can I, Esa, bear, unaided, all by myself? How can I bear all by myself? So let's think of this word bear from Nun, Sin, Aleph. This word shows up so much. It's almost what I call a priestly instruction. And I've talked about this word before. To bear something, there's a whole choreography that goes with it. If I'm going to bear something, first I have to lift it up. And then I have to carry it. And then I feel the burden of it. But from here, then I have to raise it. There's a priestly choreography to this word. And we're all to become a nation of priests. So this is something we do. We find something, we feel it, there's a burden to it, and then we hope to lift it up. But Moses is saying here, how can I bear this levado alone? Do we want our leaders to bear all by themselves the iniquities of who we are as individuals and community? We'll talk more about how we treat our leaders in a moment. But we learn in chapter 2, in Genesis 2:18, it is not good for the Adam to be alone, levado. So Moses is like, how can I do this alone? And then we have these three fascinating words, tarchechem, v'masa'achem, v'yirvachem. Thank you. And so it's saying these three things. How can I alone bear this? How this word tate resh chet is a burden, to take pains, to take trouble, an obstacle, a hindrance. We've already talked about the lifting the burdens of that next word, and then we have this sense that what is going on there through this verb resh yud vet, which means to strive or contend, to contend against, to be contentious, to be complaining, to be entitled, to be quarrelsome, for people to go against each other. Moses is saying, look, it's bad enough that I have to do so much of this and all of this teaching and all of this work and relating to God, but now you all are complaining against each other. I have to bear that too. How can I do anything about that? So we have now our problem. We have our problem. Our leader is expected to do it all. Can you relate to that? Yeah. Right. I mean, maybe excuse me, I have to get a tissue. Allergies. You know exactly what it's like, what people expect you to bear. And Moses is saying, I can't do it alone, because between the burden of you all, your complaining nature, you're not letting me do this, you're going at each other, I can't do this. The problem. Well, thank God, the next verse begins the solution. Yay. All right, so we have here, it begins, havu lachem. Now, what does your translation say? Somebody, Dan, what does the translation say for lavu?
Pick from each.
Pick from each. I'm going to challenge that and tell you that the verb here, yud, hey, vet, means to give, to provide. So it's almost as if there's an imperative, because this is an imperative form, that hidden within this is an understanding you're going to bring forth from yourselves. You're going to create a gift from your own people. You're going to go into your own people, you're going to understand who they are, and you're going to give forth from there. And in there's a posture of generosity. So we have our first solution when we're looking for choosing our leaders. Create a posture of generosity. Have a good eye. Wouldn't that be a good world? So pick from within yourselves. Anashim, well, men, but now we get women too. Yay! And it's going to be with chokhmah, with wisdom, with bina, with, we'll call it discernment or understanding, and a du'im lesiv techem, this sense that there is a deep knowledge of who it is within your tribe. There's a knowingness, the word da'at, when that shows up, there's an intimacy connected with that. Be intimate with your people. In order to be intimate with your people and knows who's who, you have to listen, open your heart, have a good eye. These are the very most important things, and that's going to lead us into the next. So we have this deep sense here that we have a problem and you're going at each other and you're putting everything on your leader. No, go into your community. Choose people, know who they are, and allow this wisdom. I want to say one very interesting thing about the word wisdom, and that is, it comes from the Mayim Loez, one of my favorite commentators from 1600s Turkey. He talks about how wisdom is somebody who sees the consequence of a thing at the very beginning. I just want to say we don't always treat our truth tellers well. What do you mean? I remember 1977 when I learned about global warming. 77. Who would have known this was going to happen? Well, we all knew. We knew if we would listen. There's a way in which we have to open ourselves up to the truth. But here's my question. How do we shift the strife? How do we allow ourselves in community to open this up so we can live this possibility? Last night at the Shabbos table, we spent a lot of time talking about some of the woes in the world and how do we reinvigorate hope into a situation that's dire, and how do we support our young people? I'm looking around the room, there's people more on my side of the generational divide than I'd say 35 and younger in this room. Our young people are not growing up with some of the foundational, hopeful stories that we grew up with. They're growing up in a different era. So how are we going to reach them and be with them and connect with them in a way where hope is possible? This is something I think about almost every day of my life. So I want to talk about Dr. Ron Wolfson's book, came out I think about 10 years ago, called Relational Judaism. I see nods. Some of you have seen this book. And I'm going to give you a quote from the book. He says that what really matters is that we care about the people we seek to engage. When we genuinely care about people, we will not only welcome them, we will listen to their stories, we will share ours, and we will join together to build a Jewish community that enriches our life. We listen to their stories. We want to know those stories. We let people know that they matter through giving the generous gift of listening. It's everything. He says this can shift the shape of Jewish engagement. Tell stories, get to know each other. I have so much more I can say about this, but I am cognizant of time. So I just want to share one of my stories. Because it's one thing to say, listen to stories, and we go, yes. And now I want to share a story. Last week I mentioned, and we celebrated, and thank you for that, the fact that I had my 30-year anniversary as a bat mitzvah. Well, we all know that I'm not 46. That ship has sailed. So I was 36 when I became a bat mitzvah. When I was a girl, my parents were assimilated. Sure, we lit the Hanukkah candles. Sure, we ate the right foods at the right times, and that was it. I did not know the Hebrew calendar. I did not know Jewish history. I did not know the taste, mamish, of Shabbat. And so as an adult, I became a bat mitzvah. And now fast forward to 2005 when I started, when I really in earnest began to teach 7th graders. And I taught them for 20 years. And I had to go in the Neve Kodesh to a lot of bar and bat mitzvahs. And I would go to the bar and bat mitzvahs and I would see the happy families and everybody gather and the beautiful standing tall of the young person and the families embracing them and loving them and all the families that had gathered and all the words, and it was so joyous. And I would weep. I would weep and weep and weep because of my missing experience. That grief that when I was a little girl, and this is how it felt like, I wasn't loved enough by my parents to give me this beautiful tradition. And as a girl, I had a yearning spiritual nature, but there was no place to have that reflection in my life. It was just, oh, don't start with us, if I would try and talk about God. Oh, never mind. And so I brushed it aside until I no longer could when I became an adult in my 30s. And so I had to process for several years my own grief in not being able to receive this beautiful education. And it helped me to become an amazing teacher because I could feel, I could meet each kid from their own yearning place. Their own yearning, each kid will show that yearning in a very particular way. And the role of the teacher is really to meet that child and to lift them up. Not to carry the burden of, I don't want to go to school. Why do I have to do this? This is stupid. To lift that up and say, here's the possibility, the opportunity, because it's there for us if we find a way to do so. This sense of our communal responsibility. What is our communal responsibility? To our leaders, to give them a good eye. To not complain behind their backs of everything that's wrong with them. Because guess what? Our leaders are people too. And they're doing the best they can, honestly. And if they're not, then you pull them aside and have a conversation with them. How do we treat our leaders? Let's be really good about that. How do we treat our young people? We lift them up. We listen to them. We help them feel special. How do we include with each other? We listen to each other's stories. We get curious about them. We make them feel special. Because you know what? Each and every one of us is so special. Such a beautiful spark of the divine. I really want to say that, Devarim. As we go through this looking for the promised land, let us think of the promised land not as a very specific land with specific boundaries that are very well spelled out in this parsha. But let's think of the promised land as a state of mind of being present, being so present in the moment to the other that you never know what unique surprise or treasure is going to come forth if you just ask the right question. May we live in such a community. Shabbat Shalom.